10:01 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's insane.
No, and then
No, and then we get news from Sean Strania, of course, that Doug Christie signed a multi-year deal to be the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. Scott Perry has now checked his first major box as the GM. When he had his introductory presser, we said, hey, what's the first order of business? And collectively, it was like, well, you got to hire a coach.
Yeah.
That's step one. He said as much. He said he expected it within the week.
Yep.
I said Wednesday because his presser was last Wednesday. I said last Wednesday, if we get into Wednesday, tomorrow, then I would think they're looking for somebody who's not Doug Christie.
Mm.
And lo and behold, that agreement has been reached. Doug Christie is the head coach of the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, so I kind of looked at this in the same way that we looked at the Malik Monk coming off the bench thing, right? The moment you put Malik Monk in the starting lineup, it was kind of over.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you gave Doug Christie the interim job and he didn't just completely fail, that's when you knew that he was probably going to be back. Mm-hmm. Because, like, look, Doug has a lot of fans within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
The organization, like Vivek, Matina, like there are a bunch of people in the front office. Vlade Divac, who is on the payroll. There are a lot of people who love Doug Christie and want nothing more than to see him succeed. Mm-hmm. This is one of those moments, though, where, like, look, if this is what you're doing, and like I think everyone out there, you can make your own mind up, but I mean, the guy went 27-24 in one of the most chaotic seasons I've ever covered.
Mm-hmm.
Like I watched Tyrone Corbin go 7-21 in a very similar situation,
mm-hmm.
and they didn't even trade the team's best player in the middle of that run. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a solid team that was like 11-13, and then the wheels fell off completely. I think Doug did a really good job of like reining this thing in, keeping the wheels on the bus. It wasn't a great finish. They finished like 7-13 over the last 20, something like that. But at the same time, he showed that he was at least a leader of men.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time that you go get him the right staff, the right coaching staff. You allow him to go choose his staff. You give him a blank check and say, go ahead and spend. Like you go get, if it's one head coach, if it's two head coaches, former head coaches that you put on your staff, whatever it is, go build that staff so you feel supported in the right way.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for my guy. I mean, like, look, nobody loves the Sacramento Kings like Doug Christie.
Sorry. Are our lights different today?
I don't know. Did you just get like shined upon?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't let that distract me. Doug Christie. Yeah, you said it, man. I guess for me, it's less like I know Doug personally, so like I'm excited for him in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of just like the on-court, like separating from that, I have no idea whether Doug is a good coach or not.
Of course not.
So I whether this is the right hire is TBD.
Mm-hmm.
The key is everything you just said. Whoever it was, whether it was Doug Christie or Dave Yeager or random person we've never heard of or Joe Brazil, whoever was going to be the head coach of the Sacramento Kings needed to have the autonomy that you just laid out.
Oh, yeah.
You need whatever coaches he's comfortable with, whatever he wants to do basketball-wise, there has to be some form of agreement here. My fear, and I don't know that this is the case, but I think where my concern comes in, like if I'm checking reasons for concern with this, is you said he has fans within the organization, and the first person you mentioned is Vivek. It's like, okay, well, was this Scott Perry's decision? Was this his call 100%? Or was his taking the job contingent on you have to think that Doug Christie is the right guy? Because if that's the case, then I think we wind up a couple years down the road exactly where we were this year, where GM and head coach aren't seeing eye to eye, and now we're going through this whole process again. So my hope and my deepest desire is that this is Scott Perry's call. This is what Scott Perry wants to do. When he laid out his vision for the Kings coach that he wanted, he described Doug.
100%.
It seemed to me. So I think this is Scott Perry's call. I think my hang up here is, again, it's not Doug. It's not even Scott Perry. It's just, it's really hard to just give the Kings the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh, okay, hey, now everything's going to go great.
Well, like, look, I think we all understood that this was probably the way it was going to go. That they brought in Scott Perry. Now, look, like bringing in Scott Perry by itself, it's not a horrible, like, crazy move.
No.
Like Scott Perry's a seasoned dude.
Mhm.
He walks in the door, and he knows exactly what he's doing, right?
Yeah, they didn't hire a rando.
No, they didn't hire Rando. And, to be honest with you, the last 3 times, they did hire Rando. Whether Vlade Divac was an NBA player and a former Sacramento King and a Hall of Famer and all that stuff, that doesn't matter.
Front office rando.
Front office Rando. Like, he had very, very little experience. Pete D'Alessandro had never been a leading man. Again, Monty McNair was like a third or even a fourth for a lot of his time in Houston and had moved up the ladder. Like, these guys were randos. They were not household names. In fact, Wes Wilcox is probably the most noticeable of all of these as someone that you had heard of before. So, like, look, I think sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But at the same time, what I like about Scott Perry is his ability to work with just about anybody. That's what I learned about him the last time he was here. It's that, he has a demeanor that is easy to work with, that he's there for the right reasons to build a winner and a sustainable winner. And if he thinks he can get away with Doug as the head coach and watch Doug grow as a head coach and become, hopefully a really good head coach in the league, then I'm okay with that. But the deal has to be that it's not, well, it wasn't really my first choice or it was it's none of that. It's whether you can go out and get the pieces to support the coach in place. Like, we can talk about all we want about how Mike Brown and either Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, that group, they didn't get along. They got along just fine. The problem was that Mike kept asking for things and the front office didn't go get those things. Just like when Pete D'Alessandro and Mike Malone really got into it years ago, it was that Michael Malone had a second-round pick rookie, Ray McCallum, playing 46 to 48 minutes a night as his point guard and said, can you please go get me a point guard? I don't care who it is. And Pete D'Alessandro went out and got Royce White, a 280-pound power forward.
Who didn't fly on planes, correct?
Who wouldn't fly on planes and who never scored an NBA basket. Ever. That's where you have to be on the same page. It's like, hey, go get me length and athleticism at the wing. Everybody knows that's what the Kings need. That's what Scott Perry said in his press conference. I'm going to get a point guard. I'm going to get length and athleticism at the wings. Okay, that's all Doug's can ask for. Like, if there's someone who's not getting along with people, you go to him and say, hey, this guy's got to go. The other thing I'd point out, too, is that, like, every situation is different for coaches. So a coach can work somewhere, they might not work somewhere else. And I know, like, here in Sacramento, we revere Rick Adelman, right? He had this 8-year run, which was the most incredible 8-year run. And you remember him in Portland and how he took the team all the way to, like, a championship but couldn't win. But I think a lot of people forget that between the Portland job and the Sacramento job, he was a head coach of the Golden State Warriors and was a complete failure, like a complete mess. They went, 30-52 his second year, and they got fired, right?
Yikes.
So, like, all of this it's always situational. And, like, whether Doug knows all of the X's and O's that he needs to know today or not, that doesn't matter so much as if he can put the right people around him and if he can have a voice that resonates in the locker room.
Yeah, and if he's given the runway to do that as well. This can't turn into, for me anyway, this can't turn into a thing where the roster's just not there this year because they're still cleaning some stuff out and reorganizing and getting the right players in, and they go, let's say, 40-42. It can't be, all right, hey, Doug's hot seat, got to make the playoffs next year. Or this is like, there has to be some build up and runway, because I don't think this roster's in a great spot. I saw our guy, I saw our guy Manny in the chat saying none of this really matters until we see what the roster looks like, and I totally agree. And that's why right now, just the Doug Christie hire in a vacuum, like, sure, like, yeah, I don't hate it. But what does it mean for the team? I think is going to have a lot to do with what their roster looks like. I think Doug can do the right things and is capable of doing the right things and pushing the right buttons. And motivating players in the right way.
Mhm.
But if the roster stinks, like,
Yeah,
I don't
I'm with
think
you.
there's any coach that's going to save it.
Yeah, I think that this roster right now, it's not so much that it lacks talent, it's that it lacks cohesiveness,
Mhm.
and there has to be a way to fix that.
Yeah, the roster as a collective is just not good.
Yeah. But as individuals, I think there are nice pieces on this roster.
There are.
It's just you got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And you got to get the right pieces in place. We'll continue